I mean, you do, especially with the pandemic. And for me, both Twitter and the podcast have made me much more impatient about the slowness of the review process because
Twitter will do that.
Twitter will do. But even with podcasts, you have a cool, you find something cool, and you have ideas and all, and you'll just say them, and they'll be out pretty quickly.
Yeah,
on
we
the
do a
podcast.
post right now about something that we both found interesting, and it's out in the world. Yep.
And you can write up something like there is a culture in computer science of an archive and preprints that don't get in your review, and sometimes they don't even go through the review process ever because like people just start using them if it's code. And it's like what's the point of this? It works. Like it's self evident that it works because people are using it, and that I think applies more to engineering fields because it's an actual tool that works. It doesn't matter if you don't have to scientifically prove that it works. It works. It's using for a lot of people.
Well, sorry to interrupt, but I just said, for point of reference, the famous paper describing the double helix, which earned Watson and Crick the Nobel Prize, and should have earned Rosalind Franklin the Nobel Prize too, of course, but they got it for the structure of DNA, of course. That paper was never reviewed at Nature. They published it because its importance was self-evident, or whatever they said.
So like the editors.
It was that purely editorial decision, I believe. I mean, that's what I was told by someone who's currently an editor of Nature. If that turns out to not
Happy
be
Wednesday.
correct, someone will tell us in the comments.
Bit
for
different,
sure.
active
I
recovery.
think that's pretty interesting, right?
Still a little bit under the weather.
Most significant discovery in biology
Like,
and bioengineering.
it's weird.
the
I'd say I'm
work of
95% at
bioengineering
health.
as well, of course.
It's just that
of
last
the
one.
last
It's just this
century
weird cough that
was
I
not
have.
peer reviewed.
It just seems to be a bit
Yeah,
stubborn.
but so Eric Weinstein.
Something
maybe
that I
others
noticed
have-
that
have talked
unfortunately
about
when I
this,
talk to my patients, my throat gets a
which
bit more
is-
dry, then I start
I don't think
coughing a
people
lot more.
understand
So that's not a good look.
how
Always make sure to wear my mask when I've seen my patients now.
poor the peer review process is. It's just the amount of
Because
because you think
common
peer
sense.
review it means all the best peers get together and they review your stuff, but
yeah,
it's
I
unpaid
thought I didn't want to
work,
strain my
and
body
it's
too
usually a
much, so
small
I was going
number
to do
of
something
people, and
simple,
it's a very-
light,
they have
active
a very
recovery.
select perspective, so they might not be the best
As
person,
always,
especially
something better
for
than
super
nothing.
novel work.
And it's who has time
Just
to
want
do
to
it.
give
I'm
my
on
body a
bunch of
little
editorial
bit
boards
more
still.
leeway into
Why, I
recovery,
don't know,
that's
but
all.
I enjoy the
I
peer
thought I'd
review
be better
process
by
and
now. It's
setting
been
things
about a
up.
week.
Oftentimes the best
tomorrow will be
scientists
about
are
a
very
week.
busy and don't have time to
Which
read.
isn't
And oftentimes
abnormal when it
the
comes
more
to
premier
being a little bit
journals
sick.
will
Normally
select
tends
from
to take about a week
kind of
to
a
fully
unique
get
kit
over something.
of very
at
good
least.
scientists who are
That's
very
just
close
annoying.
to the work. Sometimes the people are very far from the work.
My cardio is
They're
definitely
really
affected.
good.
And
I have a
both
slight
have
cough.
negatives, right? If you're very
But,
close to the
you know,
work, there's
I can do
jealousy and all
things.
those basic human things.
I can still
When
treat
far
my
from the work,
patients.
you might not appreciate this.
It's just when I
the
start
nuance,
talking and whatnot,
contribution,
yeah, I
all
start
that kind of
coughing and
stuff.
that.
And there's psychology. Sorry to interrupt
So that's
again,
good
but a good friend of mine who's extremely successful neuroscientist, Howard Hughes investigator, etc., always told me that I won't even say whether or not who they are, they select
possibly.
the reviewers
Frank?
on the basis of who has
Morning.
been publishing.
I
very
did a
well
rapid
recently,
test
'cause
last
they
week.
assume
It said
that
negative,
person's being
but
benevolent because
who knows?
they've been doing well, so that
Could have been incubating.
the love
That's
expands.
a good point to that, actually. But
But regardless, we treat it all the
the
same
idea
here
is
anyway
that
now.
editors
COVID,
might actually
no,
be the
sorry.
best
Yeah.
reviewers.
COVID,
So that was the
flus.
traditional. That's the thing
colds.
I wanted to mention that Eric Weinstein talks about.
Now that they've eased the restrictions in
uh,
Sydney and that,
several
doesn't matter
decades
what you
ago,
have, it's
editors
all about
had
common
full
sense
power.
now.
And there's
If you have
to be
something
made
and
for
you
it,
can
'cause
possibly give it to someone, then just stay home,
editors
simple.
are the ones
And if
who
you
are
do go out, just wear a
responsible
mask.
for crafting the journal.
But some people unfortunately
they
still can't
really are
figure that out.
invested in this. So it,
Yeah,
and they're
normal
also
ISO,
often
just
experts,
like
right?
yeah, just as
it
normal.
makes
It's just
sense
as if
for
it's the
an
cold
editor
now.
to have a bit of power. In this
So it's up to
case.
people's common sense.
Usually, if an idea is truly novel, you can see it, and so it makes sense for an editor to have more power in that regard. Of course, for me, I think your review should be done the way tweets are done, which is like crowdsourced on Amazon reviews.
Let the crowd decide.
Let the crowd decide, and let the crowd add depth and breadth in context for the contribution. So if the paper overstates the degree of contribution, the crowd will check you on that. If there's not enough support, or like the conclusions are not supported by the evidence, the crowd will check you on that. There could be, of course, a political bickering that enters the picture, especially on very controversial topics. But I trust the intelligence of human beings to figure that out. And I think most of us are trying to figure this whole process out. I just wish it was happening much faster, because on the important topics, the review cycle could be faster. And we learned that through COVID, that Twitter was actually pretty effective at doing science
There's
communication.
two heart rate monitors.
Really
I'm two off from each other. This one says 115.
Some
My
of the
heart rate monitor says
scientists
117.
Twitter. communicating
They're pretty close. I'm
their own
surprised.
work and other
Because
people's
these
work.
things just measure through my
No one's
hands,
putting
while my heart
into
rate monitor is
sort of
actually on my
caveats.
chest.
It's not on
I honestly didn't
your
think they'd be
ear
that
and so on,
accurate.
but it's all out
Who's to
there.
say
and
that
the
they're
data
both
just
accurate,
moves
but still.
so fast.
I didn't
And
think
if
they'd
you
be
want
that close in
stuff
proximity
to
to each
move
other.
fast, Twitter is the best medium of communication for that. It's cool to see.
I'd
I
like
have
to take
definitely
a
not
brief
been
break
listening.
and thank our sponsor, Inside Tracker. Inside Tracker is a personalized nutrition platform that analyzes data from your blood and DNA to help you better understand your body and help you reach your health goals. I've long been a believer in getting regular blood work done at checkout. I'm now on Twitter more regularly, and initially it was just Instagram. And I remember you and I used to have these over dinner or drink conversations where I'd say, I don't understand Twitter. And you'd say, I don't understand Instagram. And of course, we understand how it worked and how to work each respective platform. But I think we were both trying to figure out, what is driving the psychology of these different venues, because they are quite distinct psychologies. For whatever reason, I think I'm finally starting to understand Twitter and enjoy it a little bit. Initially, I wasn't prepared for the level of kind of reflexive scrutiny. That it sounds a little bit oxymoronic, but that people kind of like pick up on one small thing and then drive it down that trajectory. It didn't seem to be happening quite as much on Instagram, but I love your tweets. I do have a question about your Twitter account and how do you have sort of internal filters of what you'll put up and won't put up? Because sometimes you'll put up things that are about life and reflections. Other times you'll put up things like what you're excited about in AI, or of course, point to various podcasts, including your own, but others as well. How do you approach social media? Not in how do you regulate your behavior on there in terms of how much time, et cetera. I know you've talked about that before, but what's your mindset around social media when you go on there to either post or forage or respond to information?
I think I
Just
tried
my
to
hands.
add
It was inefficient.
some, not to sound cliche, but some love out there into the world, into, as O.J. Simpson calls it, Twitter world. I think there is this viral negativity.
I
that
tell
can
myself to
take
do a
hold,
light workout, and
and
here I am trying to
tried
figure out how to make
find
this
the
more
right
complicated.
language to add, good vibes out there, and it's actually really, really tricky.
It just feels so
because
inefficient.
there's something about positivity that sounds fake. Now, I can't quite put my finger on it, but whenever I talk about love and positive and almost childlike in my curiosity and positivity, people start to think like, surely he has like skeletons in the closet, like there's dead bodies in his basement, like this must be a fake.
The attic.
It's the attic?
The attic.
I keep mine in the basement. That's the details.
I was referring to your attic. I don't have an attic or a basement.
Oh.
Nor dead bodies. I just want to be very clear.
Yeah. I do have an attic, and actually haven't been up to, maybe there's bodies up there. But yes, I prefer the basement. It's colder down there. I like it. No, but there's an assumption that this is not genuine or not. It's disingenuous in some kind of way. And so I try to find the right language for that kind of stuff. How to be positive. Some of it I was really inspired by Elon's approach to Twitter. Not all of it, but the when he just is silly. I found that silliness. I think it's Herman Hesse said something to paraphrase one of my favorite writers. I think in Steppenwolf said, "Learn what is to be taken seriously and laugh at the rest." I think I try to be silly, laugh at myself, laugh at the absurdity of life, and then in part, when I'm serious, try to just be positive, just see a positive perspective. And also, as you said, people pick out certain words and so on, and they attack each other, attack me over certain usage of words in a particular tweet. I think the thing I try to do is think positively towards them. Like, do not escalate. So whenever somebody's criticizing me and so on, I just smile. If there's a lesson to be learned, I learn it, and then I just send good vibes their way. Don't respond, and just hopefully sort of through karma and through kind of the ripple effect of positivity have like an impact on them and the rest of Twitter. And you find is like that builds your actions create the community. So how I behave gets me surrounded by certain people. But lately, especially Ukraine is one topic like this. I also thought about talking to somebody who reached out to me, is Andrew Tate, who's extremely controversial from the perspective of a lot of people as a misogynist. And
I've heard his name, and I know that there's a lot of controversy around him. Maybe you could familiarize me. I've been pretty nose down in podcast prep, and I tried to do this vacation thing for about 3-4 weeks.
I've heard about that.
Yeah, and it sort of worked. I did get some time in the Colorado wilderness by myself, which was great. I did get some downtime, but in any event, mainly consisted of reading and
nature.
Reading and nature, sauna, ice bath, working out, good food, a little extra sleep, these kinds of things. I really felt I needed it, but I am pretty naive when it comes to the kind of current controversies. But I've heard his name, and I think he's been deplatformed on a couple of platforms. Do I have that right?
Yeah, he's been. So I should also admit that while I might know more than you, it's not by much. So it's like a 5-year-old talking to a 4-year-old right now.
Is he an athlete, a podcaster?
So basic summary: he used to be a fighter, a kickboxer, I believe. Was pretty successful, and then during that and after that, I think he was in a reality show, and he had all these programs that are basically like pickup artist advice. He has this like community of people where he gives advice on how to pick up women, how to be successful in relationships, how to make a lot of money, and there's like it costs money to enter those programs. So a lot of the criticism that he gets is kind of it's like a pyramid scheme where you convince people to join so that they can make more money, and then they convince others to join, and that kind of stuff. But that's not why I'm interested in talking to him. I'm interested because one of the guests, maybe I shouldn't mention who, but like one of the female guests I had, really a big scientist, said that her 2 kids that are 13 and 12 really look up to Andrew.
Male children,
Male,
female children?
yeah, male. And I hear this time and time again. So like he is somebody that a lot of young teens look up to. So I haven't done serious research. Like I usually try to avoid doing research until I like agree to talk, and then I go deep. But there is an aspect to the way he talks about women that while I understand, and I understand certain dynamics in relationships work for people, and he's one of such person, but I think him being really disrespectful towards women is not what it's not how I see what it means to be a good man. So the conversation I want to have with him is about masculinity. What does masculinity mean in the 21st century? And so when I think about that kind of stuff, and because we're talking about Twitter, it's like going into a war zone. I'm like a happy, go lucky person, but
You're
not.
like, send me to the Ukraine, but I don't want to have this conversation on Twitter.
Because it's a really, really, really tricky one. Because also, as you know, when you do a podcast, like everybody wants you to win. There's not a. It's everything you do is positive. Maybe you'll say the wrong thing. It's like an inaccurate thing. You can correct yourself. With Andrew Tate, with Donald Trump, with folks like this, you have to. I mean, it's a professional boxing match. Like you have to push the person. You have to be really eloquent. You have to be also empathetic, because you can't just do what journalists do, which is talk down to the person the entire time. That's easy. The hard thing is to empathize with the person, to understand them, to steelman their case, but also to make your own case. So in that case, about what it means to be a man. To me, a strong man is somebody who's respectful to women. Not out of weakness, not out of social justice warrior signaling and all that kind of stuff, but out of, that's what a strong man does. Like they don't need to be disrespectful to prove their position in life. He is often, now a lot of people say it's a character. He's being misogynistic. He's being a misogynist as a kind of for entertainment purposes.
So like an avatar.
Yeah. But to me, that avatar has a lot of influence on young folks. So the character has impact.
Oh, I don't think you can separate the avatar and the person in terms of the impact, as you said. In fact, there are a number of accounts on Twitter and Instagram and elsewhere which people have only revealed their first names, or they give themselves another name, or they're using a cartoon image. And part of that, I believe, and at least in some of these individuals who actually know who they are, I understand as an attempt to maintain their privacy, which is important to many people, and in some cases, so that they can be more inflammatory and then just pop up elsewhere as something else without anyone knowing that it's the same person.
This is the dark stuff. I've been reading a lot about Ukraine and Nazi Germany, so the 30s and the 40s and so on. And you get to see how much the absurdity turns to evil quickly. One of the things I really don't like to see on Twitter and the internet is how many statements end with LOL. It's like, you think just because something is kind of funny or is legitimately funny, it also doesn't have a deep effect on society. So that's such a difficult gray area, because some of the best comedy is dark and mean, but it reveals some important truth that we need to consider. But sometimes comedy is just covering up for destructive ideology. You have to know the line between those two. Hitler was seen as a joke in the late 20s and the 30s, the Nazi Germany, until the joke became very serious. You have to be careful to know the difference between the joke and the reality, and do all that. I mean, in a conversation, I'm just such a big believer in conversation, to be able to reveal something through conversation. But
all
I
about
don't
communication.
know, one of the big, you and I challenge ourselves all the time. I don't know if I have what it takes to have a good, empathetic, but adversarial conversation.
I need to learn more about this Tate person, or not learn about him. Yeah, it sounds like maybe it's something to skip. I don't know, because again, I'm not familiar with the content. But I was going to ask you whether or not you've seeked out, or whether or not you would ever consider having Donald Trump as a guest on your podcast.
Yeah, I've talked to Joe a lot about this, and I really believe I can have a good conversation with Donald Trump, but I haven't seen many good conversations with him. So like, part of me believes it's possible, but he often effectively runs over the interviewer.
Yeah, you sit him down, give him an element, athletic greens.
Yeah, just relax.
I mean, that nice, cool, air-conditioned, black curtain studio you got, and a different side might come out. Context is powerful.
Well, Joe's really good at this, which is relaxing the person. Like, here, have a drink, right? Smoke a joint, or whatever it is. But this energy of just let's relax, and there's laughter and so on. I don't think, as people know, I'm just not good at that kind of stuff. So I think the way I could have a good conversation with him is to really understand his worldview, be able to steel man his worldview and those that support him, which is, I'm sorry to say, for people who seem to hate Donald Trump, is a very large percentage of the country. And so you have to really empathize with those people. You have to empathize with Donald Trump, the human being, and from that perspective, ask him hard questions.
Who do you think is the counterpoint? If you're going to seek balance in your guess, if you're going to have Trump on, then you have to have who on?
Well, that's interesting. It's
Anthony Fauci seems to be strongly associated with sort of counter values, at least in the eye of the public. I think he's retiring soon, but
I see he's retiring soon. That's really interesting, Anthony Fauci. Yeah, definitely, but I don't think he's a counterbalance. He's a complicated, fascinating figure who seems to have attracted a lot of hate and distrust, but
and
also
love from some people.
And love
from some people. I mean, I know people, not even necessarily scientists, who have pro Fauci shirts. I've seen people with anti Fauci shirts. But certainly, but who adore him. There are people who adore him. In the same way there are people that adore Trump. It's so interesting that
That's how-
one species of animal gets such divergent neural circuitry.
It's almost feels like it's by design, and every single topic we find tension and division. It's fascinating to watch. I mean, I got to really witness it from 0 to 100 in Ukraine, where there's not huge significant division. There was in certain parts of Ukraine, but across Europe, across the world, there was not that much division between Russia and Ukraine, and it was just born overnight, this intense hatred. So, and you see the same kind of stuff with Fauci over the pandemic. At first, we're all kind of huddled in uncertainty. Kind of, there is a togetherness with the pandemic. Of course, there is more difficult because you're isolated. But then you start to figure out, like probably the politicians and the media try to figure out, how can I take a side here? And how can I now start reporting on this side or that side and say how the other side is wrong? And so I think Anthony Fauci is a part of just being used as a scapegoat for certain things, as part of that kind of narrative of division. But I think, so Trump is a singular figure that to me represents something important in American history. I'm not sure what that is, but I think you have to think, you put on your historian hat, go forward in time and think back. Like, how will he be remembered 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now? Who is the opposite of that? You have to, I would really have to think about that, because Trump was so singular. I think AOC is an interesting one, but she's so young, it's unclear to know what if she represents a legitimately large-scale movement or not. Bernie Sanders is an interesting option, but I wish he would be 30, 40 years younger. Like the young Bernie would be a good.
There are scientists working on that.
Yeah, I think so.
Not him specifically, but
Well, yeah, maybe him. We never know. There is a big conspiracy theory that Putin is that's a body double. It's no longer
Bernie is Putin.
No.
I'm having a hard time merging that in
the conspiracy theories. No. That the Putin we see on camera today is a body double.
Well, one thing that in science, and in particular in anatomy, there's a classification scheme for different types of anatomists, which they either say you're a lumper or a splitter.
Yes.
Some people like to call a whole structure something, not necessarily just for simplicity, but for a lot of reasons. And then other people like to micro-divide the nucleus into multiple names. And of course, people used to be able to name different brain structures after themselves. So there'd be the nucleus of Lex, and the Huberman fasciculus or whatever. Less of that nowadays. But and by the way, those structures don't actually exist just yet. We haven't defined those yet. I was making those names up. But what's interesting is it seems like in the last 5 years there's been a lot of trend toward a requirement for lumping. Like, you can't say, it seems that it's not allowed, if you will, to say, hey, yeah, and here I'm not stating I will never reveal my preferences about pandemic related things for hopefully obvious reasons. Some people will say vaccines, yes, but masks, no, or vaccines and masks, yes, but let people work. And other people will say, no, everyone stay home. And then other people will say, no, no vaccines, no masks, let everybody work. No one will say no vaccines, no masks, and stay home, I don't think. So there's this sort of lumping, right? The boundaries around ideology really did start to defy science. I mean, it wasn't scientific, it was one part science-ish at times, and sometimes really hardcore science. Other times it was politics, economics. I mean, we really saw the confluence of all these different domains of society that use very different criteria to evaluate the world. I mean, as a scientist, I remember when the vaccines first came out, and I asked somebody, one of the early concerns I had that was actually satisfied for me was, how does this thing turn off? If you start generating mRNA, how does it actually get turned off? So I asked a friend, they know a lot about RNA biology, and said, how does it turn off? They explained it to me, and I was like, okay, makes sense. I asked some other questions. But most people aren't going to think about it at that level of detail necessarily, but it did seem that there was just kind of amorphous blobs of ideology that grabbed onto things, and then there was this need for a chasm between them. It was almost felt like it became illegal in some ways to want, two of the things from that menu and one of the things from that menu. I really felt like I was being constrained by a kind of like bento box model where I didn't get to define what was in the bento box. I could either have bento box A or bento box Z, but nothing in between.
And I think on that topic, and I think a lot of topics, most people are in the middle with humility, uncertainty, and they're just kind of trying to figure it out. And I think there is just the extremes defining the nature of this division. So I think it's the role of a lot of us in our individual lives, and also if you have a platform of any kind, I think you have to try to walk in the middle, like with the empathy and humility. And that's actually what science is about, is the humility. I'm still thinking about who's the opposite of Trump.
Well, maybe it is not. I mean, maybe Fauci is orthogonal to Trump. I mean, not everything has an opposite. I mean, it's, maybe he's an N of one. Maybe he's in the minority of one because he was an outsider from Washington who then made it there.
But it also, I wonder, you have to pick your battles, because every battle you fight, you should take very seriously. And just the amount of hate I got, and I still get for having sat down with the Pfizer CEO, that was a very valuable lesson for me.
Well, that one got you a lot of heat.
Yeah, it still does.
Wow.
Because
you've had some pretty controversial guests on.
Yeah, that one.
Is he still the Pfizer CEO?
I believe so.
CEOs turn over like crazy. This is the thing I didn't realize. In science, if somebody moves institutions, like a big deal. Most people don't have more than 2 moves in their career, maybe, but they often move to the next building is a big deal. But in biotech, it's like I have a former colleague of mine from San Diego, and he's been a CEO here. He's a CEO there. He went back to a company he was a CEO at before. He's probably back at the university he worked at for all I know. It's amazing how much moving around there is. It is a very itinerant profession.
Yeah, I think in certain companies, I guess in biotech would be the case, the CEO is more of like a manager type, so someone's jumping around benefits your experience, so you become better and better at being a manager. There's some like leader, revolutionary CEOs that stick around for longer because they're so critical to pivoting a company, like the Microsoft CEO currently, Sundar Pichai is somebody like that. Obviously Elon Musk is somebody like that is part of pivoting a company into new domains constantly. But yeah, in biotech, there's a machine, and in the eyes of a lot of people, big pharma is like big tobacco. It's the epitome of everything that is wrong with capitalism. It's evil, right? And so I showed up in the conversation where I thought with a pretty open mind and really asked what I thought were difficult questions of him. I don't think he's ever sat down to a grilling of that kind. In fact, I'm pretty sure they cut the interview short because of that. And I thought, literally it was hot in the room and we're sweating, and I was asking tough questions for somebody that like half the country or a large percent of the country believes he's alleviated he helped through the financial resources that Pfizer has helped alleviate a lot of suffering in the world. So I thought for somebody like that, I was asking pretty hard questions. Boy, did I get to hear from the side. Usually one of the sides is more intense in their anger. So there's certain political topics, like with Andrew Tate, for example. I would hear from it would probably be the far left, that would write very angrily. And so that's a group you'll hear from. The Pfizer CEO, I didn't get almost any messages from people saying, why did you go so hard on him? He's an incredible human, incredible leader and CEO of a company that helped us with a vaccine that nobody thought would be possible to develop so quickly.
You did not get letters of that
I did
sort.
not. I mean, like here and there, but the sea of people that said everything from me being weak,
Well, it was
that
meant to
I
be a light
wasn't able to
workout, but I
call
can't
this
help myself, it
person.
seems.
How do you sit down? How do you platform this evil
Lighter than
person?
usual,
How
is
do
the
you
best way I can
make
put
him
it.
look
No
human?
weighted
All
backpack,
that kind of stuff, and that
not
you
really
have to
using
deal with
weights,
that. You have
not
to.
much.
Of course,
Still something.
it's great. It's great because I have to do some soul searching, which is like, did I? Like, you have to ask some hard questions. I love criticism like that. You get to, like, I hit some low points. There's definitely some despair, and you start to wonder, like, was I too weak? Should I have talked to him? What is true? And you sit there alone and just, like, marinate in that. And hopefully over time that makes you better. But I still don't know what the right answer with that one is.
Well, I feel that money plays a role here. You know, when people think big pharma, they think billions of dollars, maybe even trillions of dollars, right? And certainly people who make a lot of money get scrutiny that others don't. Part of it is that they are often not always visible. But I think that there is a natural and reflexive, and I'm not justifying it. I certainly don't feel this because I know some people who are very wealthy, some people who are very poor. I can't say it scales with happiness at all. People are always shocked to hear that, but but that's what I've observed in very wealthy people. But that people who have a lot of money are often held to a different standard because people resent that. Some people resent that, and maybe there are other reasons as well. I mean, among people who are very wealthy, oftentimes the wish is for status, right? Not money. You get a bunch of billionaires in a room, and unless one of them is Elon, who also has immense status for his accomplishments, typically if you put a Nobel Prize winner in a room with a bunch of billionaires, they're all talking to that person. And there are many very interesting billionaires, but status is something that is often but not always associated with money, but is a much rarer form of uniqueness out there, a positive uniqueness, if one considers status positive, because there's a downside too. But so I wonder whether or not the Pfizer CEO caught extra heat because people assume,
It's
and
the
I
worst towel
assume
ever.
also that his
You
salary is
have like
quite
a towel
immense.
and
Yeah,
fluff keeps getting all over you.
Because I have a lot of data on this,
That's
I
all I
can
got.
answer. It's a very good hypothesis. Let's test it scientifically.
He's about to tell me it's a great hypothesis, but it's wrong. I know the smirk. I know this smirk.
I honestly think it's wrong. That effect is there for a lot of people, but I think the distrust is not towards the CEO. The distrust is towards the company. One of the really difficult soul searching I had to do, which is just having interacted with Pfizer
Man, I've
folks
got no other towels.
at every level, from junior to the CEO. They're all really nice people. They have a mission. They talk about trying to really help people, because that's the best way to make money, is come up with medicine that helps a lot of people. Like, the mission is clear. They're all good people, a lot of really brilliant people, PhDs. So you can have a system where all the people are good, including the CEO. And by good, I mean people that really are trying to do everything. They dedicate their whole life to do good. And yet, you have to think that that system can deviate from a path that does good, because you start to deceive yourself of what is good. You turn it into a game where money does come into play from a company perspective, where you convince yourself the more money you make, the more good you'll be able to do, and then you start to focus more and more and more on making more money, and then you can really deviate and lose track of what is actually good. I'm not saying necessarily Pfizer does that, but I think companies could do that. You can apply that criticism to social media companies, to big pharma companies. That one of the big lessons for me, that I don't know what the answer is, but that all the people inside a company could be good, people you want to hang out with, people you want to work with, but as a company is doing evil. And like, that's a possibility. So like the distrust, I don't think is towards the billionaire individual, which I do see a lot of in this case. I think it's like Wall Street distrust, that the machinery of this particular organization has gone off track.
It's the generalization of hate again.
Yeah. And then good luck figuring out what is true. This is the tough stuff. but I should say the individuals, like individual scientists at the NIH, in Pfizer, are just incredible people. Like they're really brilliant people. So I never trust the administration or the business people. No offense, to those people, but the scientists are always the good. They have the right motivator in life. But again, they can have blinders on to focus on the science. Nazi Germany has a history of people just too focused on the science, and then the politicians use the scientists to achieve whatever end they want. But if you just look narrowly at the journey of a scientist, it's a beautiful one, because they ultimately in it for the curiosity, the moment of discovery versus money. Versus, I mean, prestige probably does come into play later in life, but especially young scientists, they're after the it's like they pulling at the thread of curiosity to try to discover something big. They get excited by that kind of stuff, and it's beautiful to see. So,
it is beautiful to see. I have a former graduate student, now a postdoc at Caltech, and I don't even know if she had a cell phone. She would come in the lab, put her cell phone into the desk, and she was tremendously productive. But that wasn't why I brought it up. She was productive as a side effect of just being absolutely committed and obsessed to discover the answers to the questions she was asking as best she could. You could feel it. You could just feel the intensity and just incredibly low activation energy. If there was an experiment to do, she just go do it. You're teaching at MIT. You are obviously traveling the world. You're running the podcast, a lot of coverage of chess recently, which is interesting. I don't play chess, but
I have some scientific questions to you about that.
Oh, okay, sure. And then let's get to those for sure. And then
you're not gonna like it.
Oh no. Okay. And then also some very do I have to spell Massachusetts again? The also you still seem to have a proclivity for finding guests that are controversial, right? You're thinking about Tate, we're talking about Trump, we're talking about the Pfizer CEO, we're talking about Fauci. These are intense people, and so what we're getting, folks, is we're not doing neuroimaging here in the traditional sense of putting someone into a scanner. What we're doing here is we're using the great Carl Diceroff, who's on your podcast.
Thank you for that. Thank you for connecting us. He's an incredible person.
He's an incredible psychiatrist, bioengineer, and human being, and writer. And your conversation with him was phenomenal. I listened to it twice. I actually.
He's an incredible person.
Carl Diceroff, who was on your someone into a scanner. What we're doing here is we're using the great Carl Diceroff, who was on your podcast.
Okay.
Thank you for that. Thank you for connecting.
This is how I look for more resources of what
He's
to
an
listen to.
incredible psychiatrist, bioengineer.
I take these guys' words for it. I might be tunnel vision in a way, like
your conversation
people,
with him was
they're
phenomenal.
definitely smarter than I am, and that's all I
listened
do.
to it twice. I actually have taken notes. We talk about it in this household. We really do. His description of love is not to be missed. I'll just leave it at that, because if I try and say it, I won't capture it well. But we're getting a language-based map of at least a portion of Lex Friedman's brain here. So what else is going on these days in that brain as it relates to robotics, AI? Our last conversation was a lot about robots and the potential for robot-human interaction, what is a robot, etc. Are you still working on robots or focused on robots? And where is science showing up in your life besides the things we've already talked about?
So I think the last time we talked was before Ukraine.
Yes.
Before.
You were just about to leave.
Yes. So that's
why I went on. I was like, this might be the last. You said you want to come out here before or after. I was like, I'll come out there before. I want to see you before you go. But here you are in the flesh.
I think so. A lot of my mind has been occupied, obviously, with that part of the world. But the most of the difficult struggles that I'm still going through is that I haven't launched the company that I want to launch, and the company has to do with AI. I mean, it's maybe a longer conversation, but the ultimate dream is to put robots in every home. But short term, I see their possibility of launching a social media company, and it's a non-trivial explanation why that leads to robots in the home, but it's basically the algorithms that fuel effective social robotics. So robots that you can form a deep connection with. And so I've been building prototypes, but struggling that I don't have maybe if I were to be critical, the guts to launch a company.
Or
And
the
that's
time.
well, it's
I
combined.
think you've got the guts. I mean, it's clear if you'll do an interview with the Pfizer CEO and you're considering putting this Tate fellow on your podcast and you're going to the Ukraine, that you have the guts. It's also it means not doing quite a lot of other things.
That's what I mean, but it does take. The thing is, as many people know, when you fill your day and you're busy, that busyness becomes an excuse that you use against doing the things that scare you. A lot of people use family in this way. My wife, my kids, I can't. When in reality, some of the most successful people have a wife and have kids and have families, and they still do it. And so a lot of times we can fill the day with busy work, with yeah, of course I have podcasts, all this kind of stuff, and they make me happy, and they're wonderful, and there's research, there's teaching, and so on. But all of that can just serve as an excuse from the thing that my heart says is the right thing to do, and that's why I don't have the guts to say no to basically everything, and then to focus all out, because part of it is I'm unlikely to fail at anything in my life currently because I've already found a comfortable place. With the startup, it's most likely going to be a failure, if not an embarrassing failure. So
well, the machine learning data that I'm aware of, I don't know a lot about machine learning, but within the realm of neuroscience, say that a failure rate of about 15% is optimal for neuroplasticity and growth. Whether or not that translates to all kinds of practices isn't clear, but getting trials right 85% of the time seems to be optimal for language learning, seems to be optimal for mathematics, and seems to be optimal for physical pursuits, on average, right? I'm sure I'm gonna, you have more machine learning geeks that listen to your podcast than listen to this podcast, but doesn't mean you have to fail on 15% of your weight sets, folks. I mean, it could be 16%. No, I'm just kidding. But it's not exact, but it's a pretty good rule of thumb.
I think a lot of startup founders would literally murder for 85% chance of success. I think given all the opportunities I have, the skill set, the funding, all that kind of stuff, my chances are relatively high for success. But what relatively high means in the startup world is still far, far below 85. You're talking about single-digit percentages. Most startups fail.
Well, I think it means, the decision to focus on the company and not other things means the decision to close the hatch on dopamine retrieval from all these other things that are very predictable sources of dopamine. Not that everything is dopamine, but dopamine is, I think, the primary chemical driver of motivation. If you know that you can get some degree of satisfaction from scrolling social media or from that particular cup of coffee, that's what you're going to do. That's what you're going to consume, unless you somehow invert the algorithm and you say, it's actually my denial of myself drinking that coffee that's going to be the dopamine, right?
Oh, interesting.
Then, and that's the beauty of having a forebrain, is that you can make those decisions. This is the essence, I do believe, of what we see of David Goggins. There's much more there. There's a person that none of us know, and only he knows, of course. But the idea that the pain is the source of dopamine, the limbic friction, as I sometimes like to call it, is the source of dopamine. That runs counter to how most nervous systems work. But it's decision based, right? It's not because his musculature is a certain way or he had CRISPR or something. It's because he decides that. And I think that's amazing. But what it means in terms of starting a company and changing priorities is closing the hatch on all or many of the current sources of dopamine so that you can derive dopamine from the failures within this narrow context. And this is a very reductionist view, kind of neuro-centric view of what we're talking about. But I think about this a lot. I mean, the decision to choose one relationship versus another is a decision to close down other opportunities, right? So I think that the decision to order one thing off the menu versus others is the decision to close down those other hatches. So I think that you absolutely can do it. It's just a question of
one more set and I'm done.
Flip the algorithm.
I gotta get ready for work.
Remap the source of dopamine to something else.
That's right. and maybe go out there not to succeed, but make the the journey is the destination type thing. But when you're financially vested and your time, and as far as I know, we only get one life, at least on this planet, and you want to spend that wisely, right?
And a lot of that, the people that surround you, I mean, people are really important. And I don't have people around me that say you should do a startup. It's very difficult to find such people.
Is Austin big startup culture right
yeah,
now?
it is.
Yep.
It is. But it doesn't make sense for me to do a startup. This is what the people that love me my whole life have been telling me. It doesn't make sense what you're doing right now. Just do the thing you were doing previously.
Why do I get the sense that because they are saying this, you're apt to go against them?
I actually was never that, unfortunately. Unfortunately, I need, I've talked to people I love, my parents, family, and so on, friends. I'm one of those people that needs unconditional support for difficult things. Like, I know myself coaching-wise. It's good to, so here's how I get coached best. Let's say wrestling. I like a coach that says, you want to win the Olympics? They will not force, like if I say I want to win the gold medal at the Olympics in freestyle wrestling, I want a coach that doesn't blink once and hears me and believes that I can do it, and then is viciously intense and cruel to me on that pursuit. Like, if you want to do this, let's do this, right? So, but that's support. That, like, that positivity. I'm never, I'm not energized, nor do I see that as love. A person saying, like, basically criticizing that, like, saying like, you're too old to win the Olympic gold medal, right? You're like, all the things you can come up with. That's not helpful to me, and I can't find a dopamine, or I haven't yet, a dopamine source from the haters. Like, basically people that are criticizing you, just trying to prove them wrong. It doesn't, it never got me off. Like, it never.
He doesn't have fuck you energy.
Where some people seem to like that. I mean, David Goggins seems to come out. He seems driven by many sources that he has access. I don't know, because I've never asked him, but I if I were to venture a guess, I'd say that he probably has a lot of options inside his head as to how to push through challenge, not just overcome pain, but he'll post sometimes about the fact that people will say this or people will do this, and and talk about the pushback approach. He'll also talk about the pushback approach that's purely internal, that doesn't involve anyone else. Great versatility there.
Oh,
Yeah, there's literally like a voice he yells at that represents some kind of like devil that wants him to fail, and he's, he calls him bitch and all kinds of things, saying, fuck you, I'm not. There's always like an enemy, and he's going against that enemy. And I wish, maybe that's something, I mean, it's really interesting. Maybe you can remap it this way, so that you can construct, like, that's a kind of obvious mechanism. Construct an amorphous blob that is a hater, that wants you to fail, right? That's kind of the David Goggins thing. And that blob says you're too weak, you're too dumb, you're too old, you're too fat, you're too whatever, and getting you to want to quit and so on. And then you start getting angry at that blob. Maybe that's a good motivator. I haven't personally really tried that.
Well, I've had external, challenge when I was a postdoc, very prominent laboratory. Several prominent laboratories, in fact, were working on the same thing that I was, and I was just a slowly postdoc working on a project pretty independent from the lab I was in. And there was competition, but there was plenty of room for everybody to win. But in my head, and frankly, I won't disclose who this is, and because there was some legitimate competition there, and a little bit of friction, not too much, healthy scientific friction, I might have pushed a few extra hours or more, a little bit. I have to say, it felt metabolizing. It felt catabolic, right? It didn't, I couldn't be sustained by it. And I contrast that with the podcast or the work that my laboratory is doing now, focused on stress and human performance, etc. And it's pure love. It's pure curiosity and love. I mean, they're hard days, but there's no adversary in the picture. They're the practical, workings of life.
That was the thing that Joe really inspired me on. People do
create adversarial relationships in podcasting, because you get, like, YouTubers do this. They get, they hate seeing somebody else be successful. There's a feeling of like jealousy, and some people even see that as healthy.
Alright, that's it for today. It was meant to be a light workout. I call it light because I was able to get through my sets without having to take a break. If you can get through your set without taking a break, it means you're too good for that set. Or you want to get to about 3 sets without breaking. Around that, but that's essentially my whole workout as well. I was able to get through the whole sets. Probably just the bicep curls, that's all. Bit weak in the bicep curls. I really don't isolate them. I just get it through doing pull-ups and push-ups and whatnot. Anyway. Oh, damn, this sickness that I've got at the moment. I want to take a breath. Oh well, it is what it is. I'm only human. Gotta remind myself. But at least I can move. I can still do what I need to do. Hard part's just talking. When I talk enough, my throat gets dry and I start coughing. It's okay here, but it's not great in front of patients. Oh well, it is what it is. Alright, just so I don't waste all the time I just saved. You guys take care. I'll be back on Friday morning, hopefully. Hopefully I'll be better then. If not, it's another light workout. It's a nice excuse for me to do light workouts, I guess. Just trying to see if it was like my deload week or something like that, but regardless, something better than nothing is what I want to say. But if you are that sick, take the break. I can still move. I can still move. That's why I can pace myself. I know my parameters. I know what I can and can't take. That's why I worked a little bit lighter today. But if I'm still not good by Friday, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. The weekend's almost here. I'll get a big enough break then anyway. Anyway, I'm babbling on now. You guys take care and